The right of a free press is essential to global muckraking around the world. I focus particularly on conflict zones, and our center has been really adept at looking at some of the biggest threats to journalists and to press freedom when it comes to conflict. That means unprecedented killings of journalists. It means the detention of journalists around the world. It also means in thinking through things like access to certain war zones and whether journalists are getting in to cover the story, whether international reporters have access to particular territories. It also means access in terms of what happens when journalists are going on military embeds with militaries that are actively involved in conflicts, and what does it mean when they're not getting in unembedded. I think a lot about access and whether or not journalists are able to tell these stories or whether they're being cracked down upon. We also look at things like whether news organizations are fighting hard enough for access or in preventing the killings of journalists or the detentions of journalists. So at the Lee Center, that means training our students for places that might be hostile environments, getting them hostile environment training, understanding how to do a risk assessment, thinking through how journalists in other parts of the world are operating and what we can do not only to support them, but also learn from them. So many journalists have experienced threats that are truly hard to imagine, and in an era of changing conflict and war, but also with technology that's rapidly evolving with the use of AI, we have to be more adept at anticipating what these threats to press freedom really can be and how we can collaborate with others who are on the front lines of some of these battles, whether that's in a place where authoritarianism is raging or whether that is in a place where journalists are being targeted and killed. And these are all lessons that we're trying to learn from, adapt our understandings of, and put forth ideas for how we can contribute to understanding and protecting press freedom. Our students are interviewing journalists at risk who work in conflict zones and are in places where the threats are really unprecedented. They're places like the Philippines, Myanmar, places like Gaza, places like Ukraine, areas where journalists face unique risks and threats, and we try to learn from them. We're also working with others to understand more technocratic challenges to a free press. When states or even when big businesses try to crack down on journalists through clever and exploitative means of using the law, whether that's criminal charges, lawsuits, and particularly how freelancers in many of these places and parts of the world where they have less resources are able to defend themselves against such incredible tactics. One of the things we focus here at the Journalism School and through the Lee Center on a great deal are these OSINT tools, open source intelligence tools, these different kinds of tools like satellite imagery, for example, and how their use can help us better protect journalists on the ground when it comes to staying safe in the field, when it comes also to their reporting, when they're doing accountability reporting on the ground, when they aren't allowed access to an area, when they have to do reporting from a distance, when they have to talk to sources from a distance, and how these tools can aid them in that reporting, but also keep them safe on the ground. At the Lee Center, we're thinking critically about unprecedented killings of journalists who are under attack, and often some journalists who've been threatened specifically and targeted specifically. Understanding not only the impact that has in some of these news deserts that have formed as a result, but also understanding what effect it has on our information ecosystem and also on the precedent that it sets for other journalists around the world when these killings happen with impunity. Journalists in Gaza, for example, have faced unprecedented threats when it comes not only to reporting safely on the ground, but also reporting amidst the loss of their loved ones, their neighbors, their friends, their families, detention of many of those they love and know, and having to continue war without the support and resources of outside journalists who are there to help relieve them of a lot of that work. All of that, coupled with access and some of these other issues, are just at the core of how we're thinking about press freedom. Journalism is a calling. It is often a calling to bear witness, to speak truth to power. That's really only possible when we're defending freedom of the press. It is a cornerstone of what we do here at the Journalism School, and it's something that I at the Lee Center am passionate about, particularly when it comes to war.